It appeared that strange nagging feeling I had had the day before was probably well-founded, because it was quickly reported that Darrell Willard had been found dead by an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound in his garage, said Morgan, his voice full of regret and remorse. Willard had been found by his wife Yvette and their young daughter when Yvette returned from work. She'd opened the garage door, and there he was, still in his pajamas and slippers. He hadn't even bothered to dress that day. And why would he? He'd obviously made a decision that he was going to exit the world, and it didn't matter what he was wearing. Crump and his photographer, who were staked out in front of the Willard house, also got a first-hand glimpse of the gruesome sight, much to their surprise. They had come to the house that day simply to follow up on the article in the newspaper about the search of the home and Willard's possible connection to Eric Miller's murder. Their goal had been to interview Willard. When no one answered the door, they'd waited, assuming that Darrell and Yvette were probably at work. When Yvette Willard pulled into the driveway with her daughter Kelsey, they moved in closer, hoping to get her to talk about the case. But as the garage door opened, they were greeted by the horrible sight of Willard's dead body. As Ed Crump remembered it, they couldn't make out at first that there was a body lying on the garage floor. To him, it had simply looked like a pile of couch cushions from the end of the driveway, as Yvette's car was partially blocking his view. She immediately closed the garage and went inside. But when the news team went to their live van and replayed their tape, they were horrified to see not sofa cushions, but the unthinkable. What should have been the most private of tragedies caught on tape. Tape that would never see air, but would be etched in their minds forever. Morgan admits he hadn't lost too much sleep the night before the suicide worrying about Willard's fate. In his mind, there was nothing he could have done. His hands were tied. He was the one who'd wanted to arrest Willard on Sunday. Clearly, had Willard been arrested, he would not have been able to kill himself, at least not as easily in a jail cell. It's a thought that has taken over Morgan's mind more than once in the years since. At the time, it bothered him to his core. It sat on Morgan's list of 1,000 what-ifs that he would never be able to change. His list was longer than most, and the consequences of the choices made were greater. But at the time, Morgan had other things on his mind. As awful as he felt about the man's death, he couldn't afford to dwell on Darrell Willard. Jeff and his crew sprang into action to handle the suicide. I didn't get invited along for the party, and didn't feel like there was a whole lot that I could offer, Morgan explains. Since Willard lived in Wake County, not in the Raleigh city limits, the Wake County Sheriff's Office was investigating the suicide. Also, Morgan was getting ready to head to New York and Boston to interview witnesses in another case, the death of Beth Ellen Vinson. This was the cold case that concerned a young girl from eastern North Carolina who had come to Raleigh with big dreams, only to have them snuffed out by a killer wielding a knife in a drainage ditch. Morgan had been assigned to reinvestigate the Vinson case, but because of his obsession with the Miller case, his focus had been diverted. It was time for him to get back on track. Unlike the Miller case, the Vinson case was 100% his, and he was determined to give it his all. Still, Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that he could be, should be, doing more to help out in the Miller case. He stuck around the office, watched the news reports, and tried to be available in case the investigators working the case needed his help. The big question, not only for investigators, but for the media, was whether or not Willard had left a suicide note. After all, this wasn't just any suicide. It was the suicide of a man intimately connected with a suspect in a murder investigation. If a note had been left, it could possibly provide valuable clues to detectives about Eric Miller's death. Reporters immediately grilled investigators at the scene about whether or not a note had in fact been left. The answer to the question was ultimately yes. Willard did leave a note, but like other key pieces of evidence, Raleigh police felt this was a fact too valuable to release for public consumption just yet. That night, Morgan said Wade Smith, Ann Miller's attorney, called Detective Debbie Regentine and asked her if a note had been left. Clearly, he was concerned that if there was a note, it might implicate his client. Morgan says Regentine took the high road and told Smith